professional wrestling injuries. Who got injured by whom, what was injured, and where did it happen? Let's find out. Hey everybody, Dr. Chris, orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine physician. Welcome to my channel, your favorite source for information on broken bones and other things.
That's a little doctor joke we like to make around here.
So today, we're talking about injuries from professional wrestling promotions, including the WWE, WCW, ECW, OTTW, and others. So our first clip involves a wrestler named Finn Balor. He was injured during SummerSlam of 2016. So we can see here that while Finn is out on the apron of the mat, he gets grabbed by his opponent, and he gets picked up and thrown into one of the barriers on the outside of the ring. And we can see that he kind of lands with his right shoulder first. And as he lands, we can see that his right arm is outstretched behind him. This causes his right arm to be the first point of contact and to take most of the weight when he impacts the barrier. Immediately, we can see that Finn is grabbing his right arm by the wrist. But when the camera pans down to take a look at Finn, we can see that not only is he in a whole world of pain, but also that the contour of his right shoulder is dissimilar from that of his left shoulder. If we look closely at his right shoulder, we can see that there is a space between his acromion, or shoulder blade, and the humeral head, the bump that makes the round part of the shoulder. There's a gap of approximately 1 to 2 inches between these structures, where normally the space is approximately 1 centimeter, or half an inch for you Americans. We can see here that Finn attempts to reduce the shoulder himself by pulling on his right wrist with his left arm. And eventually it appears that he is able to do so because we can see that the contour of his right shoulder has returned to a more normal and symmetrical appearance to that of the left. And as an orthopedic surgeon, knowing how difficult it is to reduce a shoulder sometimes, I would say that Finn Balor did a pretty darn good job of putting it in by himself while the cameras were rolling. Kudos to you, big man. This next clip involves a wrestler named Jim Cornette. And this came from a WCW promotion from 1986 or 1987 called Starrcade. And in this particular promotion, Jim Cornette was wrestling another wrestler on a platform that had been set up above the ring on scaffolds at a particularly tense point in the match. We can see that Jim Cornette is wrestling near the edge of the platform. And as he attempts to evade his opponent, he starts to slip off the edge of the platform. He does manage to get away from his opponent, but unfortunately, by this time, both legs are hanging off the platform and he is hanging by only his hands. Unfortunately, he is swinging with quite a bit of momentum while he is hanging from the underside of the platform, and eventually his grip gives up. Cornette falls to the canvas from a height of approximately 15 feet onto both of his legs. Immediately he cries out in pain, and we can see that he kind of crumples up and falls onto his left hand side. And although I looked to find information about the injuries that he suffered, there was no documentation to say exactly what his injuries were. The best information that I could find suggested that he had injured his knees and that there was some type of fracture that was involved. However, with this information, we can probably speculate as to what injuries he did suffer. When people fall from a height and land on their feet, it is quite common for them to suffer fractures around the knee. The fractures that these people suffer are known as tibial plateau fractures. And these are fractures that are isolated to the top or the proximal part of the tibia, which is the shin bone. Depending on the location of the fracture, the number of fracture fragments present, and their displacement, we are able to determine the severity of this type of fracture. Generally, there are 6 types of tibial plateau fractures, ranging from less severe to quite severe. Obviously, the treatment and the outcomes for less severe fractures are better than those for more severe fractures. At any rate, it's hard for me to determine just from this clip exactly what type of tibial plateau fracture that he suffered, but a tibial plateau fracture at the level of the knee would be my best guess based on the mechanism of injury. Because tibial plateau fractures involve a joint, there is a real possibility of post-traumatic osteoarthritis after this injury heals. There is also a possibility of an angular deformity after the fracture has united. And this just means that instead of the leg being straight, it's possible that there might be an angle or a bend in the leg after the fracture has healed. If you're watching this video and you know what happened to Jim Cornette, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below. So this next clip involves a wrestler named Pac, and it comes from a promotion called OTT Wrestling. And in this clip, Pac is wrestling a wrestler named Walter. And at the point in the match where Pac is injured, we can see that he is standing on the ropes at the second turnbuckle. While his opponent is down in the middle of the ring, Pac jumps off the rope, performing a twisting backflip in the air. He lands on the chest of his opponent, but as a result of his forward momentum, he continues to roll forward, landing awkwardly on his hands as he does so. As he pops up on the other side of the ring, we can see that he is already holding his right hand in his left hand. And when we look more closely at his hand, we can see that something is just not right. And as Pac goes to cover his opponent, we can see that there is something really seriously wrong with his middle finger on his right hand. Pac attempts to get the 3 count on his opponent, but he is bucked off at 2.5 as he rolls towards the referee. We get a better look at the index finger of his right hand, and we can see that the index finger is bent at approximately 45-degree angle at the mid finger. Now, in each of the 4 fingers, excluding the thumb, there are 2 joints known as the proximal interphalangeal joint, or the PIP, and the distal interphalangeal joint, the DIP. So here we can see that the finger has been dislocated at the PIP joint of the 3rd finger. Now, at this point, we don't know that it's dislocated, we just know that it's out of place. It could also be fractured at an odd angle. However, after a brief conversation with the referee, we can see that Pac attempts to straighten out his finger himself. And after a few quick attempts, we see that he is able to do so, and we can see that his finger is functioning normally. So this is the clue here, that there was no fracture involved and that his finger was merely dislocated. After Pac successfully reduces his finger by putting it back into the joint, he continues on with the match. This next injury comes from the 2005 Royal Rumble between John Cena and Batista. And in this match, both John Cena and Batista are the last 2 men standing in the ring. Now, if you know anything about wrestling, which I don't claim to do, but if you know anything about wrestling, you know that the Royal Rumble is decided when the last man is standing in the ring. So basically, you throw everybody else out of the ring, and whoever is in there last is the winner. So in this particular match, both Batista and John Cena fall out of the ring at the same time. Like they touch the ground at the same time. Not one before the other, at the same time. And so this creates a problem, because there can't be a winner if they both touch the ground at the same time. Because like technically they're both eliminated, then there is no winner, and you can't have a Royal Rumble without a freaking winner. So after they're both ejected out of the ring, we have referees who are holding up both of their hands, implying that they are both winners. But you can't have 2 people who win the Royal Rumble. You must have 1 winner. So while these wrestlers and the referees are in the ring trying to figure this out, we have the big boss himself, Mr. Vince McMahon, strolling down to come into the ring to set things straight. Vince attempts to slide into the ring under the bottom rope. But as he does so, he injures not one, but both legs. He's unable to stand. And while Vince is deliberating with the wrestlers and the referees, he is forced to continue his conversation from the seated position because he, frankly, is just unable to get up to a standing position. And after the discussion of how the match is going to be handled, Vince is able to exit the ring with some assistance from the referees. We don't get to see much of Vince after this as the match continues. However, it was reported afterwards that Vince tore not 1, but 2, yes, I did say 2, both of his quadricep tendons at the same time. Generally speaking, quadricep tears are injuries that would require operative repair of the tendons. These days, we would perform this surgery with the assistance of implants known as suture anchors. But in those days, before suture anchors, they probably just did this with lots and lots of heavy suture. Usually, the rehab after a quadricep tendon tear is quite onerous, and that's just for one leg. So I can't imagine what it would have been like to try to rehab 2 quadricep tendon tears at the same time. This next injury comes from a match between Sabu and Terry Funk during what is known as a barbed wire match. And in the barbed wire match, the ring is surrounded by, you guessed it, barbed wire. Because I guess you want to keep the wrestlers in the ring and you want to discourage them from coming out of the ring before a winner has been decided. So during this match, at one point, Sabu runs across the ring and attempts to jump onto Terry Funk. Unfortunately for Sabu, he becomes tangled in the barbed wire when he attempts to do so. And although it is difficult to see exactly what is going on because of the quality of the film, we can see that Sabu has suffered some type of injury to his left arm. And if we look at the film, we can see that he is looking down at a very large, deep laceration right across the biceps of his left upper arm. Like a savage, Sabu tears a strip of cloth from his costume and he ties up his biceps. He ties up his biceps and he continues the match. And despite this rather gruesome injury, he is able to continue this match until its completion. Yeah, that's next level. Next level for sure. Obviously, a wound like this would require a large number of sutures to ensure its closure, but this would only be performed after it had been adequately irrigated and debrided, meaning it was washed out to make sure that there was no foreign bodies or dirt in the wound. Also, it would be extremely important for Sabu's tetanus status to be up to date to ensure that he did not suffer an infection from the bacteria Clostridium tetani. This is the bacteria that is known to cause tetanus, or in other words, lockjaw. And this is something that can happen when people suffer lacerations or cuts from metal objects that have not been appropriately sterilized. This last injury involves a wrestler named Vader, and it comes from a match in which he was fighting another wrestler named Stan Hansen. And generally, Vader is a wrestler who wears a mask during his bouts. But in this particular match, he appears to have something wrong with his right eye, and he ends up removing his mask during the match. At several times throughout the match, we can see that he is reaching up to his right eye, and we can see that the right eyelid itself is quite puffy. And at one point, when the camera zooms into his face, it appears as though he is pushing his right eyeball back into his head. Yes, that's what I said, back into his head. Because it was like out, hanging out. His right eyeball was hanging out and he pushed it back into his skull. This is entertainment and yo, the show must go on. So after he pushes his eyeball back into his skull, he goes on to complete the match. And when doing research for this particular match, I found out that prior to entering the ring, Vader was accidentally struck in the face with a solid object. This caused an injury before they had even entered the ring. So at this point, Vader had already fractured his nose. This injury was further exacerbated during the match when Vader was accidentally poked in the eye. When Vader was poked in the eye, he inadvertently suffered an orbital fracture, which made his eye unstable within the orbital socket. During the match, his eye would repeatedly come out of socket. And during the match, he would repeatedly have to put it back in. At any rate, after this event, Vader had to undergo surgery to repair his orbital fracture and to restore the stability to his eye socket. I believe that Vader was able to continue wrestling after his orbital fracture healed. However, I could not confirm this with my research. If you know what happened to Vader after this, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below. So there you have it. Today we've been looking at professional wrestling injuries from a number of wrestling promotions, including the WWE, the WCW, the ECW, OTTW, and others. I hope this video has been both entertaining and education for you. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho.
Just a flesh wound.